So I know many of you watch these videos because you're trying to get into graduate school, or maybe you are trying to become a professor someplace, or maybe you're trying to get a job or something along those lines. I'm going to tell you a story that is going to illustrate something I think that is important for us to take in. So, when I was done my undergraduate program, I went to the best program in all of Canada, the University of Waterloo, or one of the best, I guess I should say. But it has this really unique thing where I took chemical engineering, and they have this unique thing where you work for 4 months and then you go to school for 4 months. And so by the end of it, you have uh, 3 years, 2.5 years of work experience, plus you have an engineering degree. So it's really valuable, right? And I wanted to spend the summer at home. My wife, at that time wasn't my wife, was my girlfriend, was in this small town, Dryden, Ontario, tiny little town. If you go look it up, it's 6,000 population of about 6,000 people, and 4 hours from anything. It's really, really isolated. There's not a lot of big cities that are around, no universities, anything like that. But it was a pulp and paper town. And I wanted to go back and just hang out with my parents one last summer. I wanted to, just be there and be around my girlfriend at the time. So at the summer after I finished school, right, just as I was getting done, I applied to all these jobs. I must have applied to like 30, 40 different jobs. I remember going up and down the streets. I was in, nice shirt and tie, going up and down the streets, and I got nothing. Nobody replied. Nobody paid attention to what I was doing. And they were just like, whatever, right? And I was willing. I'm a very industrious person. I like to work. I've been working since I have been about, I think it was 11 when I got my first job chopping wood for my neighbor. And I spent all this time looking, couldn't find anything. Eventually I was kind of like giving up on it all, right? I was just going to be like, all right, whatever. But my father-in-law goes and asks one of his friends, who is he was a chatty guy at the time. He passed away, but he's a very chatty guy. And he asked one of his friends if they have an opportunity. They have a small, they had a small fish camp called the Bonnie Bay Camp. And lo and behold, he was able to get me a job at the Bonnie Bay Camp as kind of like the fish boy, right? Like I cleaned fish, move things around, clean the yard, did all this kind of just random errand stuff. And what I want to point out with this, my skill set at the time had nothing to do with the job that I actually got. And it had nothing to do with actually getting me the job. What actually got me the job and got me in the door was the relationships that I actually had formed with the people around me. So why is this actually important for you? To get often a job, to get into some place, you often have to form relationships where people know about you or they're willing to vouch for you in different ways. And how do you actually do that, right? So one way is to have this sort of family bond, right? And that's often what we rely on. We have all of these family bonds that we rely on. Somebody is vouching for you and says, hey, friend of a friend, and they find a job for you. But another way is to actually build these relationships that will help you out in different ways. And so how do you actually do that? It requires a lot of work where you demonstrate repeatedly over and over and over again that you are a standout person and somebody is willing to vouch for you. So that is the first step, right? So you have to constantly be out and being vouched for by other people, thinking that you're building trust for them, or they're trusting in you. They understand what you're about, right? And they see that, hey, I'm not going to get burnt if I suggest this person to somebody else. And that's the biggest thing, right? People are really scared about getting burnt in a transactional relationship, and that happens so much, right? So they're afraid to sort of stick their neck up. Now, the other thing is, well, how do you actually get to know people, right? How does that actually grow? And that's where you have to be generous with your time and effort, and thinking about how can I give in various different ways. That's the only way that you can actually grow your network, right? You can actually grow and get people to know who you are. So right now, I'm doing the whole, online thing. I mean, there's some relationships being formed, obviously, but for most people, it's a little scary. So what can you do? You just do things where you're just kind and courteous to other people. You expend a little bit more energy than what you would. And there's a simple sort of thing that you can do that I try to take the effort to. I open doors for other people whenever I can. Sometimes I forget, but often I'll try to open a door for other people. Or if there's a moment where there's just a moment where there's a time to spark a conversation, I'll try to do that. And all of these kind of little moments are the things that sort of form relationships. And in 99.9% of the time, it turns into absolutely nothing. But I have a another thing, I have a really, really poor memory, right? Like I can't remember for very long. I have found out a couple of years ago, I have ADHD. So it's a really hard thing for me to remember names and faces. So I forget very quickly. But you would be surprised with the number of people that I bump into just in my local community. They don't sort of know me through this, I think so. But the number of people that just, give you a smile or, say, hey, your kid goes to so-and-so place, right? And I say, yeah, okay. So there's a relationship that's formed by doing these little kind of minor, tiny acts of kindness, right? And that relationship can grow over the long run. And it's these little tiny things that you do. Now, how do you actually sort of exploit, quote unquote, what we call in the business world, exploit these relationships? I hate that term, by the way. But thinking about how can you actually use them so that they can be used to your advantage. And the thing is, you often can't in the way that you're thinking about. You can ask and be forthright, which is, that's totally fine. But at the same time, you have to think about the amount that you've actually given to somebody else. And often in my experience, the asking, going for the ask, doesn't necessarily work that well, right? Because the other person might not be ready to receive or ready to be receptive to what you're doing. So what I have learned over the course of many, many years, it often opens up to you as you are a standout person, right? So you might, for example, go to volunteer at a local soup kitchen, for example. My mom did that for years. She's an amazing person. And then you get people that will bump into you and give you different opportunities every once in a while that you'd be surprised that you would actually be given. Or, you just eventually, you come to a moment where you come and talk to them and you just say, hey, I'm looking for this thing. Can you help me out? And most of the time they're going to turn you down, right? Like people are very self-centered. They're going to turn you down or they don't have opportunities. But you might find somebody that is generous enough to help you out. And what I'm suggesting here, so there's two things I want to suggest with this, right? So the first thing is, and one other thing I forgot to do is that you keep doing that sort of generous work for others, right? So if you want to get into graduate school, you have to actually help out other people that are in that particular area. So you just call out to them and you say, hey, I'm interested in what you're doing, right? You want to go become a PhD. You say, hey, I'm interested in what I'm in doing this kind of work. Can I volunteer for you? Or can I get a small little job for you and do some work for you? And you just actually offer your time and effort. And that's it, right? It's the same as if you want to become a veterinarian. My wife volunteered for many years. She's in the health profession for many, many years before she was able to build that relationship to get into that health that health profession. right? So all of these kind of little tiny things is how you actually develop relationships. And it takes years and years and years where you start doing those things. Now, so there's two things I want you to sort of realize is the first thing is lots of people be very grateful. Lots of people have vetted, have vouched for you over the course of your lifetime. You'd be surprised that there are so many people that have vouched for you in small little tiny ways that you should be very thankful for, right? If you're doing okay, you're in a privileged position, whatever that is, privileged position in my eyes, you are just living, right? Like you're there, you're in a privileged position, and any of those, lots of people have vouched for you. Now, the second thing, right, is to realize that we need to vouch for other people that are surprisingly, you would never guess, right? Like you would be like, I don't know if I should do anything for them. But, often it's those little tiny things that get people going. And it's the compounding effects over the course of a lifetime that get people from one thing to another. The actual skills that you develop, yeah, that's an important thing, right? Like that is definitely an important thing that you can do. But it's actually these little tiny relationships that you have where somebody can vouch for you or do something for you that actually matters. And if you look at how most businesses, most most jobs are actually formed, it's through these little tiny moments where somebody has done something or vouched for you. I think about the number of times that my wife has advocated for my kids, and that's an important big thing that they don't even realize is actually happening, and they won't, right? They won't until they're really old and crusty like me. And once they get to that age, then they will start to sort of see, hey, wait a minute, somebody actually did look out for us. So here it goes. For me, thanks, Mom and Dad. Thanks for doing everything that you've done. And I think everybody that has vouched, my family, my wife, and everybody else, thank you for just being there and vouching for me. And then the other thing, just try to be generous as much as you can, particularly with those people that you think are maybe just not there yet. Because you never know. And I know that you're often going to get burnt along the way. Speaking from experience, you get burnt a lot, right? So there'll be 99.9% of the time that thing is not going to work out in your favor. But what you're looking for in the long run is that 1 of 1,000 where it does work out in your favor, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, this actually made a big difference in somebody's life. You're playing the odds. All right. Take care, and hopefully this helped you out with figuring out how to leverage these relationships in your life. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.